A large storm will be coming to the United States over the next few days, and this is expected to bring the threat of a severe weather outbreak tomorrow, stretching from the southern and central plains back into the Midwest. And eventually, as we go into Thursday, which is Halloween, we could even see some spooky storms across areas like the Ohio Valley and then back through the lower Mississippi Valley. So in today's forecast, we're going to break down exactly what you need to know about this threat of severe weather and why it is important that you are staying weather aware over the next 48 to 72 hours. We will begin with what's happening across the United States this afternoon, which for the most part, things are still relatively quiet. The area that we're watching for a large storm is actually back over in the Rocky Mountains. A low pressure system is expected to intensify as we go into tonight and tomorrow morning, which is going to eventually lead to the organization of a severe weather setup that is conductive for severe weather. So we are obviously watching the storm very closely for tomorrow and Thursday, but in the meantime for tonight, there will be an isolated risk for a few severe storms from Nebraska back through Texas. In addition to that, on the north and west side of this trough, we are actually going to see penetrating snowfall across the Rocky Mountains, and eventually as we go into Wednesday night and Thursday morning, this will move into the upper Midwest and could bring the potential for maybe even a few inches of snowfall. Today's severe weather threat is not something I'd be writing home about, nothing I'm really too concerned about in general. We are only looking at a low end 1 out of 5 marginal threat all the way from Omaha, Nebraska back into western Oklahoma for some isolated wind and hail tonight. So not too concerning there. Tomorrow becomes a lot more concerning though, and you'll notice something that we've not seen in quite some time, an orange enhanced risk of severe weather in the Central Plains. That is a level 3 out of 5 severe weather risk. That does include areas like central and eastern Kansas, back into northwestern Missouri, and also far northern Oklahoma. And this is the area that we are the most concerned about for severe weather tomorrow, with the main hazards being damaging winds, which could be numerous to even perhaps widespread at times, and also the potential for a few tornadoes. And there is a chance for a strong tornado, and we'll be talking more about that possibility in a moment. The slight risk also goes from southwestern Iowa back into North Texas, a little bit more of a conditional risk back down in southern Oklahoma and North Texas, but there will likely at least be some storms. It's just a question of will they actually be severe, and if they are, they could actually be pretty intense down there. We'll talk more about that again here in a moment. And then that marginal threat goes from the Midwest all the way back through central Texas, where there could be some isolated severe weather tomorrow. So for wacky weather Wednesday, our greatest concern is going to be damaging winds. We are expecting that to be a bit more of a numerous threat in eastern Kansas, where we are expecting a line of thunderstorms to develop tomorrow afternoon and evening. That'll eventually translate to mostly a wind threat, along with the potential for a few QLCS tornadoes, which means embedded tornadoes in a line of storms. The hail threat is definitely there. It's just not nearly as significant. We do think that there will be some scattered hail, anywhere from the size of quarters all the way up to golf ball sized hail, so make sure that you are protecting your vehicle. Here's the thing that's really changed here over the last 12 hours. The Storm Prediction Center has decided to issue a hatched tornado risk across parts of central eastern Kansas and then back over into very extreme southeastern Nebraska. And the reason why this is important is because this is an area that we could see an isolated strong tornado tomorrow. What that means is that there is a low chance for an EF2 type tornado or even greater than that here in this area. So we need to make sure that you have a tornado action plan in place and multiple ways to receive alerts. As a reminder, we will likely be live here tomorrow on our YouTube channel covering this threat, so make sure you are subscribed down below. But that's not the only area that we need to focus on. We have a tornado threat that goes all the way from Wisconsin and even up into Chicago, back into north central Texas. This is a very populated area in general that we are going to be talking about tomorrow, which is why I think it's very important that everybody knows that, you know, there could be some severe weather and things could get a little bit nasty tomorrow afternoon and evening. So make sure you are prepared for the potential even for tornadoes. Tomorrow's severe weather setup is very favorable for severe weather, including the potential for tornadoes. A really big change here over the last 24 hours is that we are expecting a more negatively tilted trough, which will allow for a stronger moisture pull out of the south from the Gulf of Mexico. That'll lead to more moisture, more buoyancy. That's another ingredient that we need for severe weather. The other thing I want you to keep in mind here is that we have a southwesterly flow in the mid-levels that's going to be relatively strong, and we are expecting quite a bit of wind shear across the central plains tomorrow. So that is why we think that there will be a more elevated risk for tornadoes tomorrow, especially in eastern Kansas. The other thing that we're watching for is a triple point. This is our triple point axis as we go into tomorrow afternoon. One thing that I will note here is that the triple point is actually now forecasted to be a little bit further to the north. Your dry line is right here. Your cold front is all the way back up into parts of Iowa and also Nebraska. We do think our greatest chance for tornadoes, including strong tornadoes, would be located here, again, near Kansas City, just west of there, back towards areas like Topeka, and also near Manhattan. So if you're in this area, definitely make sure you have a tornado action plan in place. Now, that doesn't mean we can't see tornadoes elsewhere, because we are still going to have wind shear even outside of that area, stretching from Texas all the way back into Illinois and Wisconsin. So be aware that there might be an isolated tornado or two in your neck of the woods tomorrow. And the tornado threat for tomorrow is expected to last for several hours. We think our greatest tornado potential will ramp up around 4 or 5 o'clock in the afternoon from southwestern Iowa back into eastern Kansas, and eventually as we go into the evening, we think that wind shear is going to increase, and eventually our tornado threat will attempt to increase in areas like eastern and central Oklahoma and back into western Arkansas. But there is a chance, I will say, that this could be a bit more of a situation where this becomes more of a line of thunderstorms very quickly and becomes more of a wind threat over a tornado threat. So that'll be something to watch for, but if storms can stay discreet, I think tomorrow is going to be a very long day. So we will definitely be watching this very closely. We may be live for as long as 8 or 10 hours tomorrow by the looks of it. So this definitely could be a longer day depending on how things go. Here's the future radar. We'll begin with the Midwest and we'll go from north to south. So we'll start with the Midwest and then go through the central and southern plains. Overall, storms will fire up during the late morning across parts of Iowa and Nebraska. These will be elevated thunderstorms, so wind and hail are the main concerns. Low-end tornado risk. That tornado threat will really start to ramp up during the late afternoon across parts of Iowa, but again, I think it's going to be mostly just brief tornadoes in this area embedded in a line of thunderstorms. This is the area that we're watching for the greater threat, and again, we'll talk more about that here in just a moment. As we go later into the afternoon, into the early evening, these storms continue to move east. Again, any storms embedded in this line that are able to get little kinks in them will have the better shot at producing a tornado or two. So definitely make sure that you have a tornado action plan ready to go. Aside from that, scattered damaging winds are in the forecast. And then by the time we go into Thursday, this continues to move east, and eventually we are going to be watching for another low-end threat for severe weather, with mostly a wind threat across the Ohio Valley, maybe an isolated tornado mainly during the late morning and into the early to mid-afternoon hours. The other thing that we're watching for is the Central Plains. This is obviously the area that has the greatest chance of severe weather tomorrow. Right now, we're watching for storms to fire up right around 3 to 4 o'clock, mainly around the Topeka area in Manhattan. These will quickly fire, and any storms that can stay discreet will have an elevated tornado threat, hail and wind all being possible. These will eventually organize more into a linear line of thunderstorms by the mid-evening hours, so around 8 to 9 o'clock. That'll be mostly a wind threat with a low tornado risk into Kansas City, and eventually areas like Oklahoma will be dealing with that same threat. But just notice how the HRRR model keeps almost all of this linear as we go into the evening hours. And if that does stay true, I think this will be much more of a wind concern over a tornado threat. But if storms are able to stay more discreet, that is when things could turn haywire. So we need to watch that very closely with tomorrow's environment. But for the time being, it looks like that this is going to be more of a wind threat over a tornado threat. With that said, do not let your guard down. Definitely have a tornado action plan ready to go. In the southern plains, this is a more conditional area for severe weather tomorrow. Storms are going to fire up, I think, after sunset. And once that happens, these will be mostly wind and hail producers. But I wouldn't rule out an isolated tornado if a storm, again, is able to become even semi-discreet, if not discreet. And then overnight, these storms will move through the Dallas-Fort Worth area, eventually going through Arkansas. And then eventually, as we go into the early afternoon hours on Thursday, we'll be watching for another spark here across the lower Mississippi Valley with mostly a wind threat. But again, another tornado or two will be a possibility down that direction. And beyond today and tomorrow and even Thursday, this weather pattern is going to stay very active, especially this weekend, where I do think there will be multiple days of severe weather beginning Saturday and probably running all the way through Tuesday or Wednesday of next week. We do think that we'll have several live streams over the next 7 days with this weather pattern. More than likely going to have some sort of outbreak sometime next week if things continue to trend in the direction that they're going. Too early though for specific details. Just make sure you're subscribed to the channel. Eventually, as we go later into the week, things are going to stay active. We are probably going to see at least another storm after that one as we get closer to the tail end of next week. The weather's about to get very active. Make sure you stay tuned to the channel. We'll keep you posted with the latest on the severe weather threat here across the United States. And there are only 48 hours left to get 500,000 subscriber merch at shopmaxvelocity.net, which is the top link in the description below. If you want a hat, a t-shirt, beanie, mug, or sticker, again, you can pick up all of those at shopmaxvelocity.net.